My topic is on the future of the Futurists, on Strurm and Döblin. And let me first give a general introduction so that we have a little warm-up on the Futurist ideas. When Filippo Tommaso Marinetti published his founding manifesto of Futurism in 1909, with all its harsh statements such as the love of danger, courage, boldness and rebellion, the wish to glorify war, to destroy museums, libraries, academies of any sort, and the beauty of speed, he received both admiration and harsh criticism internationally. Marinetti combined his revolution in the arts with a political mission that should cause the problematic reputation of Italian futurism until today. The biased reception of Marinetti's cruel missions was one of the reasons why 3 years later the Futurists presented themselves not as a political movement in the first place, but through their paintings in Germany. And I want to recall that situation in Germany to frame the presentation of my paper. The editor of the expressionist journal Der Strurm, Herwart Walden, organized an exhibition of works in 1912 from Boccioni, Severini, Russolo, Cara and Balla from April to May in Berlin. Walden had previously confronted the Berlin audience with expressionist art, with the works of Oskar Kokoschka and the Blaue Reiter. And he tried to further oppose mimetic art concepts through his exhibition of the Futurists. He published the Manifesto of the Artists as the first manifesto of the Futurists, which was then followed by Marinetti's initial manifesto. The exhibition received a full spectrum of reactions, reaching from criticizing the intellectual poverty by Karl Kraus from Vienna up to unanimous praise of their creativity. Alfred Döblin was one of the greatest admirers of this exhibition. By that time, he was a medical doctor and young writer of short stories and reviews for Der Strurm. So Alfred Döblin, if you worked on the Futurist influence in Germany, he's actually the key figure, really, because he promoted expressionism and he got that a famous response to Marinetti's Futurist manifesto and also to this exhibition. This is all well known. I just wanted to recall it at the beginning of this conference. Döblin was totally fascinated by these pictures and praised them in a review and said he totally subscribes Futurism because for him it was an act of liberation. But then, interestingly enough, a year later he went away from that and criticized Marinetti in an open letter and distanced himself from this whole movement of Futurism. So that is actually the big reception in Germany, Döblin versus Marinetti and his ideas. What I found interesting though is this introduction of the pictures at first in Germany. And I want to focus on two new ways of perception that might not have been observed so far. So the aim of my paper is twofold. I want to trace that famous perception of speed in the painters' manifestos and Döblin's reception and works. And secondly, that's also very closely connected, I want to focus on that notion of simultaneity, which I try to differentiate further. Now, number one, the idea of speed, perceptions of speed. To be sure, Marinetti was fascinated by speed and by technical progress, by overcoming space and time. The key sentence here is in the first manifesto where he says, "Time and space died yesterday. We are already living in the realms of the absolute, for we have already created infinite omnipresent speed." End of quote. And then also he chose between the terms dynamism, electricity, and futurism before he chose futurism to be the name of the movement. Marinetti propagates speed like wine as an elixir of life, as Günther Berghaus stated. And Berghaus also showed the affinities of Marinetti to Nietzsche's concept of the Dionysian with speed. The desire to destroy, I quote Nietzsche, to change, to create something new, can be the expression of an abundant force pregnant with future. So movement and speed became a religion, as Schmidt-Bergman summarized, which everyone had to submit his work to. So I don't want to quote from Marinetti's first prose, this tam-tam-ta-ta-ta-ta, I know you're, I'm sure you're familiar with that. But now, like Marinetti, Umberto Boccioni wanted to paint, I quote, vibrations and the speed of forms, not the thing, but the rhythm of the thing which moves. Boccioni aimed at expressing the absolutum of speed. And Gino Severini emphasized again a new perception of space and time as well as of life, the inner vitality of the motion inherent in the object as the central futurist influence on expressionist art. The intended effects were also clear: to bridge the gap between art and life and to bring aesthetic innovation into the real world. So this is also what they say in the foreword of the exhibition. They have an intoxicating goal that Marinetti also emphasizes, to have an elixir of life. So the effect of art, I think, is clear and has well been presented also in research. Now, given these intentions, and that's my point now, Döblin's comment on the art exhibition of 1912 appears like a misreading, however a productive one. Döblin claims for all art of painting and sculpture at the beginning that its message usually bangs from the walls. Futurist art, for him, does the opposite. It demands time for itself. And now he writes, every painting is a poem, a novel, a drama. You cannot read it in 2 minutes. You need more time with the futurists than with the pointillists or impressionists. End of quote. Döblin stresses the high demands on the spectator and tries to find out about the principles of futurist art. He is enthusiastic about the multi-layered simultaneous aspects. The pictures were seen, as he argues, as if X-ray eyes punctuated with holes from the front to the back, percolated with light coming from all sides, with people transparent and huge edifices of walls. For Döblin, only the soul sees and listens in these paintings. He admires, to give you an example in that same review, Boccioni's La Risata in this manner. And I wanted to show you this picture to follow up his particular perception of these paintings. So on Boccioni he writes, the painter dances like a drunkard around the head of a woman. Again and again the head returns, once seen from above, from the right, the left, angular, ranged. The painter cannot get enough from looking at the mirroring marble table, this one up there, which wanders like a leading motive through all panaches of the image. And again, 2 hands light a cigarette above a red flame. End of quote. Here he focuses on this again and again. That's what I want to point out a little more. So this idea of circulating, you see this head circulating and seen from all kinds of angles. And the next quote on Gino Severini's The Haunted Dancer. Severini, I quote, regards the face of a restless dancer in purple walking twice across the plain. She turns around fully. So you see one turn, right? A gentleman watches her with his head in the neck, and from the ground of the picture, 2 sulphur yellow cat eyes stick out. These 2 eyes. No foreground, no background, no time, no space. On the ultimate ground, everything lies unhurried, and a portrait should be painted like that. So in German, this quote is, auf dem Urgrund liegt alles gemächlich. And for me, that was really a striking observation, because I stressed in the beginning that all I wanted to present is speed, and they wanted to have an elixir of life, so even for the spectator, you should get into this rush of Nietzsche's Dionysian principle, and Döblin does a total different reception. He looks from a distance and says, you need to take time, and something else is revealed here. So Döblin comments on a reality which is not speed itself, but mediated through speed. That's my point here. And a reality on which all elements are evenly placed, side by side. And he actually goes on this in his theory as well, that literature should be like a process of an excavation. So it's not really like pointillism, putting one to the next, but excavating a kind of movement in order to getting out this other ground, this other reality. in the picture. Yeah, it's too short actually to trace this philosophy, which I think is really interesting, back to the philosophies of Bergson or others. And I think there's a lot of Ernst Mach actually and the naturalist sciences in this view of the pictures, but we could talk about that in the discussion. Now, Döblin, after this reception of that exhibition in 1912, the big question that Döblin raises is how can you transform the ideas of the futurists in literature. And he's really amazed by Boccioni and Severini and the painters, but he's not amazed by Marinetti at all. Because Marinetti proposes certain techniques, how you get that done, and Döblin answers that for him that is too monomanic. Actually, that's not his way of doing it, and he really is very aggressive against Marinetti. And I just quote these two lines because it's so funny. He says, "We don't all want to roar, sound like a rifle, or make machine gun noises against Marinetti. And then I don't want to hear trum trum, ta-ta-ra-ta-ta, etc. 50 times over. This doesn't require any great mastery of language." So we have to question ourselves, how does he solve it? And if you read the remarks on the novel in 1970, I go a little further where I think he finds his own language in order to express what he already wanted in 1913. He complains, in his remarks on the novel, he complains about the addiction to compression in the novels and the need for tension and plot in the novel. In his novel, he claims layering, accumulating, turning and shifting is the rule. And to go forward, I quote, can never be the slogan of the novel. The reason for this addiction to compression, in his view, is a new incapability of the audience to spend more time to the book. There is enough time out there, says Döblin. However, the newspapers and the film ruin the capacity to use it. So, again, the question, that's his claim, and now what does he do with it? Actually, in the German context, it's well known that Döblin has developed his own theory of an epic, the epic that confronts the novel. He doesn't want to sum up, he really wants to layer and shift, and yeah, has actually literature that's very hard to digest in the end because you need time to read it. But I want to give you a few hints just to show how he actually is inspired by Boccioni and I think is able to transform this in literature. One can already be seen in his novel Die Ermordung einer Butterblume, The Assassination of a Buttercup. This is actually a collection of stories that appears in 1913. And the main figure reminds a lot of Büchner's Lenz, that might be a little more familiar. It's actually a way to craziness. Perception gets so weird and disturbed that it's hard to find a way out of it. What I want to point out here is that figure, Herr Michael Fischer, he's a bank employee and the central figure. He reminds of the Archangel Michael and his defeat of the dragon. At least this scene where Michael defeats the dragon is turned upside down in the novel. And that's recalled in the line when Fischer reminds us of a terrible dragon, that's a quote, who swallows something alive unhurriedly. So there again, there is this notion, this reality that seems to be the basis of the whole very hasted and hurried kind of series of images and perception that's actually dominating the story. This idea of a dragon swallowing something alive inherently, which could be an ultimate ground of emotional states, of course, which take their own time, unimpressed of reason. But that's only a first hint. What I want to point to now is the first great novel of Döblin, The Three Leaps of Wan Lung, a Chinese novel which he put down in 1912 and 13, so very close to his response to the Futurists. And it's already well known that this is also a response to Marinetti's Marfaka le Futuriste. Marinetti designed the strong hero who is the ultimate hero and overcomes humanity because he's in everything and is being gross and cruel and actually a kind of a superhero. And Döblin does not go along with that, so morally he puts this other Wan Lung against Marfaka as a figure who promotes a whole group of the weak. They call themselves the people of the weak. and they try to get power against the emperor by being weak, not using the sword in order to get to their goals. The three leaps actually of Wang Lung represent three attempts to deal with the question of violence and human guilt. First, Wang Lung uses the sword and wants to kill everyone out of an experience of violence. Then he says, I don't want to do it. And the third, he says again, I'm going to do it. And he uses the sword again, but then again he resigns. So it's this going up and down, the question how to deal with violence. Now, but back to this idea of the ultimate ground, where everything is even, I found it very interesting to see in this novel that the key act, the catalyst for the whole plot, is a violent act. Actually, Wang Lung has a friend called Zuko, and he sees how Zuko is killed by the police without any reason. Zuko just wants to leave the country and is a very peaceful person, and the police comes and kills him. And of course it's a traumatic event, but it's not really initiated traumatically because he's aware of it. Wang Lung sees it, and instead of action now, there's a point of retardation in the writing of Döblin. And that can be seen in these lines. Zuko, it says in the writing, his serious brother lay unsaved on the street. Zuko was his brother. Zuko was left unsaved. Zuko lay on the street. So you see one complex sentence broke down in three simple sentences, trying to digest, to understand what happened there. To me it seems like a really dropping out of content, like little contents need to be, not digested is maybe the wrong word, but understood, which are actually not rationally understandable. And from then on, this whole novel actually circulates around understanding what happened to Zuko. You can see on page 40, tears ran across Wang's face. He cried desperately. And then again, a couple pages later, Zuko was battered to death. That was done to him. He, Wang, then felt the overwhelming pressure of suffering. At the back of the head, on the tongue, and the antrum of the chest, he moaned. It would be a reason to take revenge, yet he didn't believe himself and couldn't believe himself. And then it appears again and again over the whole book, up to this point where he says, I'm already like soft-written flesh, like stinking rains, I can only cry and mourn. He really doesn't come up to terms with this event, and finds the group of the truly weak, who he joins, and this group actually wants to support him in fighting against Zuko. And that's the moment where he says, I want to make an end to murder and revenge, I cannot stir from the spot with this. So that cannot be the solution. And they have this group successfully, but then they're actually fought by the emperor again, and they need to fight back. And at the end, you see of the book again, when I think back of Zuko, this moment comes back. And the whole novel ends with this last question, to be quiet, not resist, can I do it at all? The novel was received as a masterwork of expressionism, and Günter Grass honored later Döblin's new and revolutionary presentation of mass use. But again, movement is not the message here, but a means to present, as I think, a reality going in circles that provides an insight on human guilt and the spiral of violence. So it could be actually read again like this head of Boccioni, going in circles around and doesn't come to any solution. This was my first aspect on speed and the idea of Döblin and his very particular view on the painters, to not to see the speed but to see the resentment, the arresting of time basically, which this art tells him. And the second method of simultaneity draws from there. It could not be the same as well, because simultaneity is also is actually initially meant to be a visualization of speed, a state in which different elements merge into the expression of dynamism. And interestingly enough, also this idea of simultaneity comes from the painters in the German context. Boccioni's article, Simultanéité Futuriste, appeared in French in der Strurm in November 1913, and was the beginning of a theoretical argument about what to do with simultaneity. So it was the lyric expression of modern life, of the simultaneity of knowing and communication. And the painters should, as you know, present railroads, steamships, airplanes, and city life. The synthesis of the inner and outer perception was intended in order to mediate a totality of the psychical impressions. But now if you look at the title of the images that were also presented at the exhibition, for example, La città che sale, the forza di una strada, sobbalzi di carousel, vibrations of a carriage, you see that what they have in focus are actually little time sequences. Yeah, the idea to move in space, it's actually a matter of a couple seconds that they try to push into one moment. So the idea of simultaneity that was propagated in 1912 and 13 is clearly an idea of a compression of space. And this compression of space is also something that they saw that Döblin would take up in his writings. And if you read on the influence of Futurism on Döblin, the key argument is always that he took up a simultaneous style. And what they understand with that is this talking in ruptures, but also like a compressed space. Now, what I think what Döblin also does with this, actually a very different approach to simultaneity. For him, it's a compression of time, I would say. And I wanna develop on that in the last 2 minutes. Compression of time is actually, I think, also a pretty well-known argument for you, but I was struck that it has not been seen in this context with Döblin. Let's skip that. The compression of time you can already see in the story on Wang Lung, because it calls a historical moment. There was an uproar in China in 1774, and Döblin picks up this historical moment in order to present something that's actually going over history, it's actually a general insight in human beings. And then what's really interesting again is that in Wallenstein, he uses in the Great War, he writes a book on Wallenstein on the 30 Years' War. So again, he recalls an historical event, trying to describe from a distance view the whole embarrassments of his present time. And that's what I meant with simultaneity. When you read his words, they have these layers of time that you can read within the text. He also makes it very clear in his theoretical writings when he says, that's the quote here, the time gets different in different depth in our pores. You should not believe that the blank plain indication to time is the norm and the usual thing. The fewest people experience their time. It's clear what I want to say. They are in a certain sense not present at all. What does he mean with this? The present time drops in different depths into the artist's individuals. This is not an easy procedure as between Zeus and Danae. Like the earth-born individuals are similarly layered and yet so much worse shifted and interlaced. We have foliations in us that go back to the Ice Age, others that date from the birth of Christ. We stem through father and mother from far away. So the clear analogy to the building of the earth, from the inner kernel to the outer crust, that's how we are actually made with these different layers of time. And to give you a final quote, this is how it comes out in Wallenstein in a small passage. I think simultaneity here is both a compression of space and a compression of time. And I want to give you this quote in order to show you how he interlaces this, how this is always intertwined in Döblin's very unique concept of simultaneity. For example, he writes about the 30 Years' War, again, it's Wallenstein. Through Germany, which swang, moved, unrested and shrugged, new regiments thundered from Swabia, Franconia, Moravia, from the Rhine dragoons with pikes, flying musketeers, light polished cavaliers, in light mobs a grey society behind heavy bulky wagons. So he recalls the whole scenery of the 30 Years of War with old vocabulary, which I did not translate because it's all old words for the jobs they had around the war. And similarly here, old things, Sturm, Töpfe, Pechgrenze. It's really hard to translate that because I'm not a medieval Anglicist. That's one thing. But then he says, in the meantime, kids sat in front of the basement doors, played, screamed, laughed, turned their little rosary, rode on sticks. The women lulled their babies to sleep, sang, trifled with earrings and bracelets. The farmers enlarged their barns, and then what do the bourgeois do? What do the sick do? That's all put in a row. And then in the end, evenly nice, the weather day after day, light nights pervaded with air, the days rose, slowly the stars progradated silently above. What's my point here? You see it's a compression of space, clearly the war scene, and then the scene in the village, and the bourgeois and the nobility, and finally the scene of the stars movement, but then also compression of time because of this old vocabulary. You can recall the historical time, but you can also recall a picture actually of your own present time, of the Great War that he tries to represent here. Now this brings me back, last sentence, because you're looking at me demanding. What does this all have to do with the future? And I want to just sum this up in the picture of the apocalypses. You know, Marinetti drives his car into the ditch and tries to build a new humanity of that. So that's actually a picture, an old picture of the apocalypses as a downfall. And after the downfall there comes paradise, the paradise of high technology. A clear future that he takes all the field of destruction into account. So Döblin, I think, just to make a point here, uses a different understanding of apocalypses, and that is apocalypses as revealing of something that's underneath, and that's maybe the connection point between the Futurists and Döblin, revealing of that reality that he saw in Boccioni's pictures. Thank you.